My brother got a luxury watch for his birthday. Dad said, "You deserve the best." I remember sitting at the dining table, hands folded in my lap, watching the golden wrapping paper slide off my brother's gift. The paper caught the light from the chandelier as it fell, shiny and expensive, just like everything else in that moment. Inside was a Rolex box, dark and glossy, sitting there like it belonged in a showroom instead of our house. My brother's face lit up instantly. He laughed, genuinely surprised, already reaching for it, like he knew exactly what it was even before the lid opened. Dad clapped him on the shoulder, pride all over his face, and said he deserved the best. He talked about my brother's promotion at the firm, how it was just the beginning, how great things were coming for him. Mom was already leaning in with her phone, snapping pictures from different angles, telling him how handsome it looked on his wrist, how successful he appeared. She kept saying how proud she was, her voice bright and full. I sat there quietly, watching all of it, feeling that familiar tightening in my chest. I told myself not to overthink it. It was his birthday. This was normal. This was how things always went. Then they turned to me. My gift wasn't on the table. Mom reached down beside her chair and handed me a plastic grocery bag. No wrapping paper, no card, just the thin crinkle of plastic in my hands. I remember noticing how light it felt compared to the heavy box my brother had just opened. I reached inside and pulled out a toaster. It was old, scratched along the sides. When I tilted it slightly, a few crumbs rattled around inside, clearly left behind by whoever owned it before me. I could feel the grime in the grooves, the faint smell of burnt bread lingering when it hit the air. I just stared at it for a second, my mind strangely blank. Mom laughed. Not nervously, not apologetically, just laughed and said, "Now you can finally learn to cook." She added that maybe I'd stop being such a burden, like it was a joke, like everyone would find it funny. Dad didn't even look up. He was too busy admiring the watch on my brother's wrist, asking him how it felt, adjusting the clasp for him like it was some kind of ceremony. I set the toaster down carefully on the table. My hands were steady, even though everything inside me felt like it was shaking. I said thank you. I meant it, somehow. Or maybe I just said it because that's what I was trained to do. Then I excused myself and went upstairs to my childhood bedroom. Once the door closed, the silence hit me hard. I stood there for a moment, staring at the walls, the posters I'd taken down years ago, the furniture that hadn't changed since high school. Then I started packing. It took me 40 minutes to pack everything that mattered. Clothes, documents, my laptop. A few personal items I'd bought myself over the years with money from my part-time job at the community college library. I moved efficiently, almost mechanically, like I'd been practicing this moment in my head for years. I left behind everything they'd ever given me. The bed, the desk, the books they bought back when they still pretended to care about my education. All of it stayed. I took the toaster, though. I don't know why. Maybe because it was proof. Maybe because leaving it behind felt like pretending it hadn't happened. Downstairs, I could still hear laughter, glasses clinking, my brother talking excitedly about work. No one noticed when I walked out the front door. No one called my name. I'd been saving money for 2 years. Not much, but enough. Enough for a security deposit and the first month's rent on a small studio apartment across town. I'd found it weeks earlier, just in case. I'd always told myself I was being paranoid, that things weren't really that bad. Still, I kept the listing saved. The apartment was small, and the heating barely worked, but it was mine. That first night, I slept on an air mattress on the floor. My back hurt, the room was quiet, and it was the best sleep I'd had in years. Day 1 passed. My phone stayed silent. Day 2, I went to work at the library like nothing had changed. My coworker asked if I was okay. I told her I was great. She didn't believe me, but she didn't push. Day 3, I bought groceries with my own money. I made my own meals. I used the toaster for the first time. It worked just fine. Day 4, my phone exploded. Mom called first. She was crying, asking why I hadn't come home, asking where I was, what was wrong with me. I let it go to voicemail. Then Dad called. His message was angry, demanding I return immediately, saying I was being dramatic and childish. My brother texted asking what my problem was and why I was upsetting Mom. That was when I realized something clearly for the first time. They weren't confused about the toaster. They were confused about why I'd finally stopped accepting it. I blocked all of them after that. Mom, Dad, my brother. It felt drastic, my thumb hovering for a second before I did it. But once it was done, there was a strange sense of quiet. Not peace exactly, but space. Room to breathe. They still found me anyway. On day 6, they showed up at the library during my shift. I didn't see them at first. I was in the stacks, reshelving returns, when my supervisor came looking for me, her face tight in that polite but annoyed way she got when something disruptive happened. She asked if I had family here. By the time I peeked around the corner, Dad was already raising his voice in the reference section, demanding to know where I was. Mom was crying openly, drawing looks from students who were just trying to study. She kept saying my name, asking how I could do this to them, like I was hiding somewhere nearby just to hurt her. I stayed in the back office until my supervisor asked them to leave. I listened through the wall as Dad argued, then finally relented. The door closed. The library went quiet again. No one asked me anything afterward. That night, my brother came alone. He knocked on my apartment door for 20 minutes. I sat on the floor on the other side, my back against the door, listening to the rhythm of his knocking change from impatient to angry to almost pleading. I didn't answer. Eventually, it stopped. A few seconds later, I heard paper slide across the floor. The note said I was tearing the family apart, that I needed to think about someone other than myself for once. It mentioned Mom not eating, Dad being worried sick. It framed everything like I was some kind of crisis they were all suffering through. I threw the note away without responding. A week passed, then 2. The calls and messages slowed, but they never fully stopped. They tried everything: guilt, anger, bargaining. Mom sent a long email about how much she loved me and how she didn't understand what she'd done wrong. Dad sent a text saying I was cut off from family financial support, as if I'd ever actually been receiving any. My brother tried sounding reasonable, suggesting family therapy, saying everyone just wanted to talk. None of them mentioned the watch. None of them mentioned the toaster. I kept going to work. I paid my bills. I lived my quiet life. Then my grandmother called. I almost didn't answer. I was sure they'd gotten to her, convinced her to guilt me into coming back, but her voice was different, softer, sad in a way that didn't feel manipulative. She asked if she could visit. Just her. I said yes. She showed up with groceries and helped me put them away without commenting on my tiny kitchen or the cheap furniture. We sat on my secondhand couch, and she made tea using my one nice mug. When she asked me to tell her everything, I didn't hold back. I told her about being 12 and bringing home straight A's the same day my brother brought home B's, and how they took him out to dinner while I got a nod. I told her about getting into a good college with a partial scholarship and being told it was too expensive while they paid full tuition for my brother's private university. I told her about working 2 jobs, contributing to household expenses while my brother got an allowance. Every birthday, every Christmas, every achievement that went unnoticed. I told her about the toaster. She didn't interrupt once. Her tea went cold in her hands as she listened. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she told me something I'd never known. When I was born, my parents were struggling. Dad's business had failed. Mom had just lost her job. I wasn't planned. 3 years later, when things stabilized, they had my brother. He was planned, wanted, the child they meant to have when they were ready. She said she'd watched them treat us differently our whole lives. She'd tried to intervene, tried to talk to them, but they didn't see it. In their minds, they loved us equally. They just saw me as resilient, independent, someone who didn't need as much. I asked why she never told me. She said she'd hoped they'd realize it themselves, that they'd wake up before it was too late. She squeezed my hand and told me she was proud of me, that leaving took courage, that I deserved better. After she left, I cried for the first time since moving out. 3 weeks after I left, my parents showed up at my grandmother's house, demanding she tell them where I lived. She refused. Dad threatened to cut her off from family events. She told him she'd raised him better than that, and if he couldn't see what he'd done wrong, he had bigger problems than a missing child. My brother called her a traitor in the family group chat. She left the group chat. A month in, Mom sent me a handwritten letter, 6 pages long. She wrote about her childhood, about being overlooked, about promising herself she'd never do that to her own kids. She said she didn't understand where she went wrong. She never apologized. She never mentioned the toaster. She framed everything like a mystery I needed to solve for her. I didn't write back. My brother sent me a job posting from his firm. Entry level, decent pay. He said he'd put in a word for me, that this was my chance to get my life together. He said if I apologized, we could all move forward. I blocked his number too. 2 months after I left, I got a small promotion at the library. Better hours, a slight raise. I enrolled in online classes to finish my degree. I made friends with my neighbors. I adopted a cat from the shelter. I was building a life without them. And that was something they still didn't understand. 3 months after I left, my grandmother told me Mom had been asking about me at church, telling people I'd abandoned the family over a misunderstanding, saying she didn't know what she'd done to deserve this, playing the part so well that strangers were comforting her. Dad, according to her, was telling business associates I was going through a phase, that I'd be back once I matured. My brother was telling his friends I was jealous of his success. None of them understood. Or maybe they did, and understanding just didn't matter enough. A few months later, I ran into my brother at a coffee shop. I saw him first and tried to leave, but he caught up to me outside. He looked tired, older somehow. He asked if we could talk. I said no. He said the family wasn't the same without me, that Mom was depressed, that Dad missed me, even if he couldn't say it. He invited me to Sunday dinner, said we could work things out. I asked him if he still had the watch. He looked confused and said of course he did. I asked him if he knew what I got for my birthday. He hesitated. Said he remembered I got something for the kitchen. He couldn't remember what. I walked away. 5 months after I left, Dad had a minor health scare. Nothing serious, but enough to make everyone rally around him. My grandmother called to let me know and said she'd understand if I didn't visit. Mom texted, saying Dad was asking for me. My brother sent a long message about family responsibility and being there when it mattered. I sent flowers to the hospital. No card. No name. When the flowers arrived, Mom cried and insisted they were from me. Dad threw them away. He said if I couldn't show up in person, he didn't want empty gestures. 6 months after I left, I finished my degree. I walked across the stage at my community college graduation with my grandmother in the audience. She was the only family I invited. She brought flowers, took photos, and took me to dinner afterward. She told me she'd never been more proud. I didn't tell my parents. They found out through social media. Mom called crying, asking why I hadn't told them, saying they would have come. I didn't answer. My brother sent a congratulatory text that felt obligatory. He mentioned his firm again, said the offer still stood. I deleted the message. 7 months in, life settled into a new normal. My apartment, my job, my cat, my routines, my parents. Calls had dwindled into occasional check-ins that felt more like reminders that they still existed than actual concern. My grandmother visited every other week. We talked about everything except them. Then my brother got engaged. The announcement came through social media. Big ring, beautiful girlfriend, perfect photos. I felt nothing. My grandmother called to warn me they'd want me at the wedding. She was right. Mom called the next day, suddenly warm and loving, saying this was a time for family to come together. Dad sent a formal email saying my presence was expected and that we could put our differences aside for one day. My brother texted, asking me to be a groomsman. I said no to all of them. The backlash was immediate. I was selfish, cruel, holding grudges over nothing, ruining my brother's special day, tearing the family apart. Messages came from extended relatives I barely knew, all telling me the same thing. Get over it. Show up. Be the bigger person. I muted all of them. 8 months after I left, I was offered a full-time position at a university library in another state. Better pay, better benefits, better everything. I accepted immediately. I told my grandmother over dinner. She cried, but she smiled. She said she'd miss me, but she understood. She made me promise to call every week. I told my parents through a short email. I was moving. Don't contact me. I'd reach out if and when I was ready. I didn't give them my address. Mom responded with paragraphs about abandonment and betrayal. Dad replied with one sentence saying I was making a mistake. My brother didn't respond at all. I moved 2 weeks later. The new city was bigger, colder, unfamiliar, and full of possibility. I found a better apartment. I made new friends. I started fresh. Nobody here knew about the toaster or the watch or the family I'd left behind. My grandmother was my only connection to my old life. Through her, I heard updates I never asked for. The wedding was beautiful. Mom cried the whole time about my empty seat. Dad gave a speech about family that everyone said was moving. My brother got promoted again. None of it touched me. A year after I left, I met someone. She was kind, funny. She treated me like I mattered. When I told her about my family, she held my hand and said she understood. Her family wasn't great either. We built something together based on choice, not obligation. 15 months in, my grandmother had a stroke. I flew back immediately and sat by her hospital bed. She recovered mostly, but she was weaker now. Needed help. I arranged care near my new home and visited as often as I could. My parents showed up at the hospital while I was there. Mom cried as soon as she saw me. Dad's jaw tightened. They didn't approach. My grandmother, tired but alert, told them to leave me alone. They tried to argue. She got agitated. The nurses asked them to leave. As they went, Mom whispered that I looked good, that she missed me. I felt nothing. My brother found me later in the cafeteria. He sat down without asking and said this had gone on long enough, that I was being ridiculous, that I'd made my point and needed to grow up. I asked him what point he thought I'd made. He said I was angry about the birthday, that I felt overlooked, that I wanted attention. I asked if he knew my middle name. He didn't. I asked what I studied in college. He guessed wrong. I asked where I worked. He said a library somewhere. I asked if he could name a single conversation we'd had in the last 5 years that wasn't about him. He got angry, said I was being unfair, said family forgives, moves on, shows up. I told him family notices when you exist. He left without another word. By then, I understood something clearly. Leaving hadn't broken my family. It had only revealed what was already missing. 18 months after I left, my grandmother moved into an assisted living facility near me. It wasn't an easy decision for her, but it made sense. I visited 3 times a week. We played cards, watched her favorite shows, talked about my work, my girlfriend, the small, ordinary things that made up my life now. She never brought up my parents unless I asked. Sometimes I did. She told me Mom had started therapy, that Dad was reading parenting books, the kind with vague titles about healing and communication, that my brother was busy planning for kids. She said they all still asked about me. She also said they still didn't understand. 2 years after I left, my girlfriend and I got engaged. We planned a small ceremony. Just friends. Just my grandmother. No one else. When I told her, she smiled and asked gently if I was sure, if I'd regret not inviting them. I told her I was certain. She nodded and never asked again. My parents found out through mutual acquaintances. The calls started immediately. Mom begging to be included. Dad furious that I'd shut them out of such an important moment. My brother sending long messages about how I was being petty, how I'd regret this, how I was destroying the family over ancient history. I changed my number. The wedding was perfect. Small, quiet, full of people who actually knew me. My grandmother cried happy tears. My wife's family welcomed me like I'd always belonged. No one mentioned the people who weren't there. We honeymooned in Europe, sent postcards to my grandmother, and came back to our life. I built a career, published research, got promoted, bought a house, lived a full, complete life without them. When people asked about my family, I said we weren't close. Most didn't push. 3 years after I left, the toaster was still in my garage. It sat on a shelf, dusty, unchanged, with the same crumbs still caught inside. I never used it. I never threw it away. It had become something else entirely. A marker. Proof. A reminder of the moment I finally stopped pretending. One afternoon, my wife noticed it while we were organizing boxes. She picked it up, turned it over in her hands, and looked at me gently. She said I didn't need to keep punishing myself by holding on to it. She was right. That weekend, I threw it away. As it disappeared into the bin, I felt lighter than I expected. I didn't need it anymore. I'd already learned to cook. I'd already learned how to survive, how to choose myself. My brother still has his watch. I don't know if he ever thinks about that birthday. I don't have to wonder anymore.